Okay, fasten your seatbelts on this one because we are about to dive into the deep stuff. This is the information processing model, also known as a model of human memory, and everything on the board behind me is going to be the stuff of our next video, maybe even more than one. So we'll do sort of a tour de force through the whole process first, and then we'll come back and we'll hit all of the pieces and parts of this video, or excuse me, of this process individually and talk about the implications of this to the classroom. Again, this is a newer view of the way that things work. This whole thing was essentially developed based on the notion of computers. So it's the idea of input and processing and output, and then memory storage, working memory, long-term memory, that would be the hard drive. So I'm sure you get the analogy. Let's go ahead and dive into it. I'm going to step off the camera for just a minute. I do encourage you to take a few minutes and maybe an entire page and write this down as it is up here, and I will talk about all these pieces individually in just a minute. And now we're back, and here's how the process goes. The first thing is that in the environment around us there are things that stimulate us. There are stimuli in the environment. There are things that we are able to sense with our basic senses. And we have sensory registers here. The sensory memory is how well those sensory registers maintain the exact copy of what it is we've experienced. So if we think about this. Think about listening to a clap. Listen to this clap. Make sure your volume's turned up well. And I want you to listen after the clap. Ready? I'm going to do it again. Listen after the clap. Now, did you hear the sound sort of just come along and go boop and then be gone? Or did you hear like this, kind of trailing off? Most people would hear a little bit of that trailing off. That is evidence of your sensory memory. Another thing that actually works, interestingly enough, on a camera as well as in person, take your pen, try this yourself, take a pen, and instead of rotating it about the point that you anticipate that it will rotate around when you're holding it here, rotate it about a different point. Try to rotate it about a point that's in the center of the pen or pencil. And you notice what's happening is your eyes are seeing the pen actually bend. We know that it's solid, but it's actually bending in your head because your brain is essentially taking quick pictures of this in all of its different positions and pasting them together much like old films were made. Others might be a feeling you have if you don't just smack yourself, but if you take a couple of fingers and you press on your arm, focus on that part of your arm, and then lift off your fingers and focus here again still, you should be able to feel that even after your fingers are gone. There's a latent feeling. There is still some sensory memory that's happening there. So these are all different ways that we can go. We have visual memory. We have auditory memory. That's what we see, what we hear. We have tactile memory, which is touching. And then we also have this olfactory or taste or combination of the two. You know, if you pinch your nose and you talk like this, then you sound funny, but you also can't taste anything. So what you should do is think about this. An example of this memory might be eating, well, for me, Doritos. If you eat a Dorito, you can probably taste that even after you've brushed your teeth, even after you're, maybe 15 minutes later, you're still tasting it. This is an example of that as well. So we have stimuli that come in from the environment. If we are not able to sense those stimuli, then they are lost. But the only way we're not going to be able to receive these is if our sensory receptors are not functioning. That is to say, if we have some sort of an impediment, like we can't hear, we can't see. There are those who can't feel. So that if that happens, then those stimuli are just completely lost and we don't get them. But if we do get them, if we do receive them, and we have some sensory memory, then the next thing that kicks in is these two filters. And these things are called filters because they can change the nature of what we sense. So this attention filter, if we don't attend to something, then it will also be lost. If something happens but we just don't attend to it, then as soon as the sensory memory is gone, as soon as this part dies out, it's gone, it's lost and gone forever. If we attend to something, then we also cannot help but perceive it in a certain way. And there's a lot of question about whether this is actually a filter or a process or perhaps even a memory store of its own kind. We're going to go with the book on this one for now, and we're going to say that perception is essentially the way that we understand what it is that we've experienced. Also, let's just think for just a second, let's think just about this section. This part of this whole model deals with, or is most appropriately applicable to what we're going to do in our classroom to organize and set the environment for instruction. Look here. If we have, let's just picture an elementary classroom. Let's say that our elementary classroom has all sorts of centers in it and all sorts of boards and things that are just all over the place. And we have we're talking about adding numbers, just adding single-digit numbers. So that's our lesson for the day. But think about the elementary classrooms that you've seen if you've been in one. What you'll see very frequently is you'll see kids with either laptops or iPads or some other sort of tablet device. Or, if not that, then you'll see them, the teacher is at the board and the kids are sort of around. And there's all of this whole 30 feet of the front of the classroom. And within that 30 feet, we have an empty space about like that, where the kids are supposed to be focusing their focusing their attention on content. Well, let's think about this. If I have the classroom rules on one side, and I have today's schedule on this side, and I have pictures of different student work all around, and I have the word wall all the way around the top of my classroom wall. And if I have all of these things going on, I need to do something as a teacher. I need to do something that is going to help students to focus on the stimuli in the environment that are important for learning that particular lesson. Notice all of those things are stimuli. Those stimuli are all being sensed. They might all get attended to. If that's the case and all you're trying to deal with is this one right here, then you have a bunch of competing stimuli that you really need to do something about. So, think about how do you structure the classroom. Now, am I saying that you should not have all of those other options for young children? Not at all. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying, though, that if their perception is that from where they're sitting, they can easily see the entire front wall, perhaps you need to move them closer to the action so that what they can see is what's important, and the things that are beyond their peripheral vision hopefully will not interfere in their attendance to what you're trying to do. So that's part of what we need to do in the classroom. Another thing is that we all need to be on the same page. So when you introduce content to the students, make sure that your introduction includes how they are to perceive it. Let me give you an example. If I'm teaching early children, early childhood, let's say colors, I'm trying to get them to understand or to know colors. And we're going with the basics, blue, red, green, we'll just say that. That's wonderful. I have all of that information and I can give them examples and I can say, this is a blue thing. That's blue. Your jeans are blue. That wall is blue. The book that you have is blue. All of those things, these are all blue. And even though I may look at them and see that they're all different forms of blue, they're all just blue. Because what I'm trying to do is get across a broad concept. Blue, red, green. If those are what I'm trying to get across, then I need to give lots of examples that fall into that category. And then I need to have the students develop their understanding of the concept blue. But let's fast forward 15 years. And let's say that that child is now going to a tech school and is in an interior design program. If they call everything that used to be okay to call blue, blue, they're going to fail. Because their perception needs to be different. Their schema, which we'll talk about in a second, their schema needs to be a much more complex thing in their head that they can draw the information from. So these are the pieces here. Now, I probably will not go back and discuss a lot about these because we pretty much got that. But I do want to mention one other thing. Think about this. A student with attention deficit disorder. We're looking at this model, but look particularly at where attention is on this model. Attention is something that, if it's attention deficit, take this out of the equation. Take it out of the model. And then see what happens. That means that there is nothing that is filtering out those things that we don't need to attend to. So, what's the problem that somebody with attention deficit has? It's not that they can't pay attention. It's that they can't stop paying attention. Everything comes through all the way to perception. And notice, there's nothing between here and working memory that's going to stop it up. Now let's move on to this working memory idea.